Okay, for our next presentation, we actually have two speakers. The first is Dr. Matthew Berg, Science and Policy Director. Matthew received his doctoral degree in hydrology from Texas A&M University. He authored the first voluntary water quality management plan from Texas accepted by the United States EPA, developed an award-winning curriculum for training stakeholders in water issues, and has received multiple awards for teaching, communication, and policy work related to water resources. Katie Anderson, after studying in biomedical science at Texas A&M University, Katie used her experience in commercial real estate to launch into water conservation. 5 years later, Katie founded Save Water Co. and was named to Forbes magazine's 30 Under 30. Ms. Anderson has implemented projects nationwide, saving over 1 billion gallons of water and counting. Please welcome Dr. Berg and Katie Anderson.
Okay, so I'm actually going to start the presentation today, and Matt's going to come in halfway. My piece is going to be sharing a little bit about Save Water Co., our methodology, some of the results and successes that we've had, and Matt's going to help wrap that up into the bigger picture. Hopefully I know how to work this thing. There we go. Okay, so when we got into water conservation, we really had two main focuses for ourselves. The first being, was there a way to save water without changing behavior? So we're not saying that changing behavior isn't something that needs to happen, and we obviously advocate for behavior change. But the question I had was, could we save water without waiting for behavior change? And the second is capital intensive. So obviously we wanted to focus on something that was extremely cost effective. And having these two focuses in mind, we felt like we could get the right incentives across the board in order to save water. This led us to our target market. So for us, we looked at what would be the lowest hanging fruit as far as conserving water. That led us into high density commercial real estate, so apartments, hotels. Obviously these commercial assets have a lot of people, human use. The example I've used up here is a 100-unit apartment complex. So you might have one apartment complex. On that apartment complex, it might have 100 to 200 units. A unit is a dwelling unit, so it was the equivalent of a single-family home. The way I look at an apartment complex is if you have 100 units, it's the same as 100 single-family homes, except that we only had to go into one driveway instead of 100. So for us, it was a more time-efficient way of tackling a lot of different homes at once. So that obviously led us into going and making relationships with apartment owners and managers. We first would conduct an audit process to determine which projects were good for what we do, meaning that they consume more water than they have to. We do a comprehensive audit on the historical consumption. So what we like to do is take a portfolio of apartment projects. We'll determine or pick out projects that are consuming a lot of water. We look at the density and demographics of each asset, so how many occupancy, density, demographic. If you have apartment A and apartment B, apartment A might have all one-bedroom units. Apartment B might have 2 and 3 bedroom with a lot of families. Obviously, these two are gonna use water very differently. So the mistake is taking apartment A and comparing it to apartment B. Instead, we take apartment A and compare it to apartment A. And we do that by benchmarking gallons used per person per day. You can see here that we have two main approaches once we find a good target candidate. The first being our baseline conservation. I love this program, and you'll see why here in a minute when I show you some examples of consumption results that we've gotten from doing baseline conservation. But essentially, baseline is we go into every single unit, we fix drips and leaks, I do replace shower heads and aerators, and we rebuild the toilet. Matt's gonna get into that a little bit later. The misconception behind toilets, and there's a lot of conservation devices on the market now that you can take a 3.5-gallon tank toilet and have it use less water due to these devices. And the engineering behind the toilets deems that as being false. So what we say when I rebuild a toilet is that I can only make that toilet operate as efficiently as it can. So in our first approach, again, fixing drips and leaks, any inefficiencies inside the toilets, shower heads and aerators. I don't focus on irrigation. I also don't focus, again, on behavior change. So if this resident wants to take a 10-minute shower, we allow them to take a 10-minute shower. We also try not to restrict water from them. So the going joke in the company is that if I can't wash my hair with the shower head that we use, then it's not a shower head that can be used. But if I can, then surely anybody can. When we do this, we benchmark our properties at 60 gallons per person per day. And each of our crew members can complete about 7 units a day, just to give you an idea on how fast this program can be implemented. The second approach is everything in baseline conservation, except when it comes to the toilet. Instead of leaving the existing toilet and making it work more efficiently, we replace it with a higher quality, efficient one. When we do this, we can get the gallons per person per day down to 40, and each crew person can move through about 2 units a day. So here's an example of baseline conservation. Again, just to reiterate, this is only us fixing drips and leaks, inefficiencies, and replacing shower heads and aerators. So I'm not replacing toilets in this regard. Oh, went too fast. Okay, so there's a lot of numbers up there, but I'm really going to pull your attention to the consumption. You can see there, and I'm going to step aside. Is it right in front of me? Oh, it sure is. So the property, as you can see over the historical, the read dates there on the left are the water bills each month. The consumption is the second column. The number of days in the read obviously are going to affect the amount of water a property uses. If you have 35 days in your water bill read period versus 28, there's going to be more consumption. The next GPD is the gallons per day. Occupancy is going to be how many the dwelling units actually have families living in them. And then there at the end is the gallons being used per occupied unit per day. So this project here was using roughly in that 2 million to 2.2 million gallons every single month, or an average of 305 gallons per occupied unit. After our program, you can see there that the consumption took a significant dip, and the main number I want to bring your focus to is the 183? I can't see. 183 gallons per person per day, per unit. So basically 40%. The main point I'm trying to drive here is that without replacing toilets and only fixing inefficiencies and drips and leaks, we were able to cut the consumption on this property by 40%, which is pretty significant given that we did not ask them to change their behavior. So these residents were taking the same length of showers they were taking before, flushing the toilets the same amount of time, and we were able to take that consumption and cut it by 40%. This was a 260-unit apartment property. It took us 10 days to fix, and currently right now we're saving roughly just less than 1 million gallons of water a month, or 2.9 acre feet. And annually we'll save 11.3 million gallons, or 34.8 acre feet per year. This is one of our home run deals. I added this one to this presentation because I think that it really shows the significant impact of drips and leaks. In the conservation world, we talk about drips and leaks often, but rarely get a glimpse as to just how bad they can be. This is a fantastic example. This project is just in South Dallas. It was a 348-unit deal. Took us 15 days to complete. You can see there the consumption's ranging anywhere from 3 million to 4.5 million gallons of water per month, or gallons per day per occupied unit of 618. We only did baseline conservation on this project. So again, I did not replace anything other than showers and aerators, and I focused mainly on fixing drips and leaks and inefficiencies inside the toilets. And we cut the consumption by 62%. So what's significant for me, and what I sort of use the analogy for this example of, this property is operating like a colander. And so as a water supplier and as a municipality, you're going to take a look at this apartment project and think that it needs 5.6 million gallons of water every single month to operate. But since we did not change behavior, and all I did was fix drips and leaks, what that showcases is that it doesn't. It actually only needs 2.2 million gallons of water a month. And so could it be possible that this is happening everywhere? And if so, could we be overestimating the actual supply of water that we really need? So if our society is operating like a colander, what we are finding in these apartment projects is that the colander is getting bigger and the holes are getting bigger, and we're just trying to figure out how to pour faster and pour more. So Replacing toilets is a big conservation effort. It's seen a lot in the rebate programs across municipalities. Obviously, that's something that we focus on as well. So we have that type of approach. Here's an example of what you can see underneath that type of program. Again, consumption each month, 1.3, 1.4, 1.2 million, down to 345,000 gallons. I did not ask, again, these residents to change behavior, so this was just taking internal infrastructure, taking it, making it more efficient, fixing drips and leaks, and we were able to cut their consumption per dwelling unit from 284 to 108. So on this particular project, this was a 154-unit deal. It took us 9 days. We're saving roughly 565 gallons of water a month, or 6.7 million gallons a year. This is results based on baseline conservation. I didn't add the results of what we do when we add toilets on top of the pie, again, just to drive a point that this is the type of water savings you can have without changing behavior and only fixing drips and leaks. So you can see there, the red is their consumption before, the blue is after we go in, and the green shows the savings. So on baseline conservation, we average anywhere from 35 to 40% consumption on each project that we touch. Okay, so drips and leaks, we talk about these often. What's funny is last night in the restaurant we were in, the toilet was running, and there's a drippy faucet in this convention center here. So I tend to take videos and keep track, and if I go to your house and I stay in the bathroom a little longer, it's because I'm definitely checking things out. But I wanted to add a couple of videos here just to show you how bad drips and leaks are and the ones that we really focus on and fix. So the first video, I think it'll play. Do I press anything, or will it play? Oh, whoops. I'm not pressing anything. Okay, so you'll see the sink faucet over there on the left. This is an apartment unit that I walked into. The lady mentioned that it's been doing this for she doesn't remember how long. So we measured this, and it would fill a bathtub 3.5 times a day. Now, what's interesting is you might think that this is an anomaly. This is everywhere we go. Everywhere we go. So the next one is a very common leak. This is what I call a diverter leak. So a diverter leak, I'd like each of you to go home today, and you're gonna go take a shower, I'm assuming. So when you take a shower, you turn on your hot and your cold water. You're either then going to turn a middle knob, or you're gonna pull up on your spout, and that's gonna turn on your shower head. If you turn on your shower head and you look down and water is still coming out of your spout, that is a leak. We measure those to do a gallon in 7 seconds. So if you can imagine taking a 10-minute shower and you have a family of 4, how many wasted gallons are being used when you take a shower? That's an example of what one of those can look like. The third one, I was in a restaurant, went to the restroom, and this happened. One flush. 2. 3. And it wasn't auto, so it wasn't me standing there and the toilet just kept wanting to flush. That's just a malfunction due to low maintenance. I cannot tell you how often I find these everywhere I go. So when I call it baseline conservation and we're fixing drips and leaks, why I'm able to cut properties by 40% is because that is happening in every single unit that we go into. And my super favorite is the last one. The longest flush of life. It's still going. And actually, we cut that video short. So what's interesting about that flush is I went to a client's office building, shot to the bathroom, came out, washed my hands, and in washing my hands, I realized that the toilet was still going. So then I go back in there, and I mean, it's going. So I'm hitting, I have no tools with me. I'm sitting here hitting this toilet, trying to figure out how to make it stop. Leave the bathroom, go to the client, say, oh my gosh, there's a toilet in there, it won't stop flushing. And the lady says, oh, that happens all the time. So I said, oh my gosh, so I ran back to the bathroom, it's still going. I then took out my cell phone to take that video. So I'm gonna let Matt come in. He's gonna wrap up the rest of it, and then hopefully we'll have some, be able to answer some questions afterwards.
Thanks, Katie. Yeah, we've dubbed that one the eternal flush or the infinite flush. We're probably not going to make that one for sale, though. Probably not a very good investment for you guys. So that stuff seems kind of shocking. How do you feel about those videos that you shared? Like, that's terrible, right? That's amazing. But at the same time, if you think about it, why shouldn't we expect some of that to drop off? When we work out and make sure our bodies are finely tuned and operating at the peak of performance, it doesn't stay that way forever. You break down, you get sick. It doesn't happen with our bodies. If we think about a car, brand new, drive it off the lot, even if it doesn't exactly get miles per gallon what the EPA says it does, and that's usually not the way it works, it's still got a pretty good operating machine. But that doesn't always last forever. So if we've got our bodies and the things that we spend some of the most money that we have investing in, those don't last forever, why should we expect toilets and everything else in the bathroom to do that very thing? Why should we expect sinks, faucets, showers, and toilets to always operate completely perfectly without any diminishing effects? Why do we do that? We assume that that's what's going to happen. So let's kind of talk about what that means, what we've seen, what we might be able to save. If you look at some of the regional water planning efforts across the state, they'll assume that if you put in a brand new toilet, it'll last for 25 years operating exactly the same way. Put in a shower head or an aerator, it'll last for a decade and a half. I don't think my body's going to stay exactly the same way for 25 or 15 years. Cars certainly not. If we looked at all of the 7,500 units that we've been in recently here in Texas, these numbers are shocking. Some of those toilet leaks, that's just a straight leak all the time, but toilet inefficiencies, some of the stuff that Katie hits on, a toilet is using more water than it has to. 2/3 of toilets in Texas that we've seen use more water than they have to. So that means they're using more than what's labeled. That means that they're using more that we're planning in our regional planning efforts that they use. Diverter leaks that we've seen are almost 50%. And that doesn't mean that all of them are pouring like a giant river, but all of them within that leaking are losing serious gallons every single day. Then if you take a look at showers, that's the head above you. That's around about 10%. Sink leaks, that's about 10% as well. Now, it would be a tragedy to walk in and see every single one of these in a single unit. It's been done, but I guarantee you, you've been in a place that's got at least one of these. They're out there, and they make a big difference. So why should we expect what we put in a bathroom or anywhere else we use water to always operate at peak performance? It just doesn't happen. What we do as a plan is put in a toilet, and that's the answer to all of our problems. Put in a 1.6 or 1.28, and that's going to automatically reduce water use. Not so fast, my friends. Even those numbers don't always tell the truth. Based on a whole lot of units that we've been into, yeah, the old 3.5s do use quite a bit of water, but even those use more than they're labeled to use. We found them using up to 5 gallons of water. That's a lot. The 1.6 dual flushes, that's depending on how much damage you do in the toilet bowl, you pick which button you push. Those use more than they're supposed to. The thing that's really interesting to me, 1.6s have been really common the last couple decades as a water-saving measure to put into bathrooms. Guess what? They use about 50% more than they say they are using. We found them using up to 4 gallons for 1.6. For 1.6. And even when we go to some of the more recent technology of a 1.28, those are using significantly more, up to almost 2.5 gallons per flush. But we are planning based on those numbers on the bottom, the 1.28s, the 1.6s. There's some leaky math here. Numbers just are adding up. So when we think about it, just because a label says a certain thing, that doesn't mean it's going to last away forever. And it definitely doesn't mean that everyone is going to be that way out of the box. You open up a brand new toilet, just like you drive a brand new car off the lot, doesn't mean it's going to meet specifically all the time, or even that day, those exact specifications. There's some surprises there. If you think about it, adding up, even just in this multi-family space, almost 20% of Texans live in what we might call an apartment or multi-family property. 20%. And if you add in hotel stays, that's another more than 500,000. So that is a lot of concentrated water use that's maybe not getting the focus it really deserves. If you look at what we've seen, compared to, especially building off what Katie talked about earlier, if you look at what's possible just fixing leaks and drips and tweaking some of the existing fixtures, we could save, in most properties that we look at, 30 to 40%. Just simple efficiency measures. Not even putting in toilets or anything like that. So really, this is a really easy path forward. And if you wanted to, in some places, add toilets, and not just any toilet, but a toilet that's operating the way it's actually supposed to, you could bump that up even farther. We're really good at meeting what we project to be our water savings, and we're projecting in a lot of these properties that we go into to be able to save well over 50% of water use. So this really should kind of hit a light bulb for you guys in terms of what does it mean for our water planning efforts across the state? Are we missing something here? What we found is in doing these efforts, it takes about $425 an acre foot a year, and this is consistently just for leaks and drips. So for a brand new acre foot, about $425 a year. And that means about 9.5 apartment units to get that acre foot. If we throw in toilets, it's a little bit more because you got to pay for a big, fancy new toilet. But you can pay that off a lot faster because it takes a lot fewer units. So there's a big opportunity here to make a big splash, pun sort of intended, in water conservation. If we compare with what's going around the state, the 2012 state water plan that the Texas Water Development Board put out estimated all new water for the future to cost about $6,000 an acre foot. $6,000 an acre foot. And they're currently in the process of putting together all the regional plans to get out the more recent version of that plan. But that called for $53 billion total to meet water needs for the future, just in Texas. If you look at Region C, that's up around the Dallas area, they're looking at $421 million for 136,000 acre feet, and that's in their current regional water plan. If you look at Region H down in Houston, where our main office is, $564 million. Just the capital costs are big. They jump out. And this is just to reach those conservation numbers. Even Region L looks at about $724 an acre foot. So what does this mean? What does this mean in terms of all of our regional planning efforts? We've put all this together, and it's not based on, hey, here's our product, buy it, it's automatically going to be pie in the sky, solve all of your problems forever, but it's based on data. And we will map something before and follow well into the future to really see where the opportunities for savings are and where they've actually documented. Feed that back into the city's plans to help them really look forward to the future. But the big thing here is it doesn't depend at all on behavior change. People are tricky. I'm tricky. You can't predict what I'm going to do tomorrow. Heck, I can't predict what I'm going to do tomorrow. I guarantee a lot of you can probably say the same thing. Even if you give me all the information, I've been to school more than I really care to talk about. I sat in a lot of classrooms. Just because you give me more information doesn't automatically mean that I'm going to do the best thing for everybody else or for me. It's really tough to change behavior. So this approach actually lets people keep doing exactly what they're doing. But one of the interesting things is this approach really eases that tension that we've kind of talked about between urban and rural sectors. If you look at where almost all of the growth in new water needs is, it's in municipalities. It's people moving into town and needing drinking water there. So this really works towards that goal. One of the things we're really excited about is it really attaches or works toward what we call the unengaged middle. A lot of people that really work in water conservation are homeowners. How can I help? How can I play a big role? Or the municipalities that sell water. How can we do this at a big level? There's a big group that owns a lot of property, responsible for a lot of people's homes, that's being left out. This approach works right at that. And I've heard it said, actually just a couple weeks ago, was at a water conservation meeting, they said the low-hanging fruit is gone. I said, no way. If you do things like this, if fruit gets any lower, you're going to need a shovel. This really is the lowest hanging fruit in water conservation. I've also heard it said, even today, people are coming to Texas all the time. Not quite as fast as they were in the recent past, but they're still coming. They're not bringing water with them. Well, actually, the average human body has about 13 gallons of water in it. I don't think it would be very popular to go in and get that water. So, as a little bit easier approach, let's make sure that when they get here, let's make sure the place that they live uses not a drop more than it really needs to. That's it. You guys. She'll moderate. She's
Okay.
great.
Yeah, if anybody has any questions, we're happy to answer. Okay, so what's interesting about toilets is there's what we call flush strength. So I've actually taken a flush bench and tested in toilets. We look at drain line carry, overall flush strength. So what's interesting is that you go to Home Depot, okay, and you're going to see a $100 1.28 gallon per flush toilet over here, and you're going to see a $300 1.28 gallon per flush toilet on this side. They sort of look the same. They're both white. They both use 1.28 gallons. You know, what are you going to choose? We're going to choose the $100 toilet every single time. And so what we found in testing these toilets is that usually the lower quality, the cheaper toilets are using more water than they even designate. I mean, I'm talking straight off the shelf. A 1.28 is using 2 gallons. And not only that, it has no flush strength whatsoever. So if you've got a human being who's, has the same amount of waste coming out of them, but you're taking the water to carry that waste through the plumbing system from 5 gallons to 1.28 with absolutely no flush strength, you're going to have issues in the plumbing system. So when we go onto these projects, a lot of people think that we only tackle older projects, but we can go on to properties that were built in 2005, 2007 and save 30%. And not only that, but the plumbing system of these older properties, if you do too much conservation, you don't have enough water flowing through your system, you can have backup issues there. So a really important thing is flush strength. So that's something that we test for. It's not all about just taking a toilet and having it use the least amount of water possible. You have to make sure that the strength to carry the waste out of the bowl and through the plumbing system is high enough. And so I would tell you that if you have experience with a toilet that you have to flush 1 and 2 and 3 times because it's an efficient one, it's probably not a high quality one that doesn't have a lot of flush strength. There are toilets though that can do what you need it to do though.
My house is 95 years old, and I think that some of the toilets are nearly that old, but they work fine.
Usually when you've got, 5 gallons moving through the waste, it's enough to carry most anything down the plumbing system.
My question is your data and what you look at are multifamily apartments. Any data or any speculation on single-family homes in terms of what savings could be achieved with good maintenance for them?
So what's interesting is we don't have a lot of data on the single-family homes, and the only reason is because, again, when I use the example of an apartment complex is, in our opinion, the equivalent of 100 single-family homes, we'd only have to go into one driveway. The truth is that what's happening inside each of those units inside of an apartment complex is the equivalent of what's happening in each of our single-family homes. The only thing I can think of is if you own your own home, it's possible that whenever you're walking through and you have a leak, that you would fix it. That said, most of what we do is undetected. So the diverter leak, unless you even know to look for that, you probably have no idea if that's even happening in your home. You can't hear it. You have to look for it. And the same for your toilet. Most of you go home and flush your toilet. I mean, it says 1.6 on it. You're assuming it uses 1.6 unless you ever, pulled out a suctioning deal and suctioned the water out of it like we crazily did. You probably have no idea how much water it's really using. So I would say that we don't have the data for the single-family homes. However, my opinion is it's very, very similar across the board. The reason we focus on multifamily is because for us, it's just the lowest hanging fruit.
Okay, thank y'all.
Thanks.